So to call a complete stranger on the other side of the country and start talking real estate and start talking, hey, not only do I want to maybe buy a home in this place I've never been to before, I want to buy a fourplex.
The military taught us discipline, it taught us leadership, but it never taught us how to really build wealth and income. This is the Active Duty Passive Income Podcast, and I'm your host, Mark-Ian Sitch, a United States Marine turned full-time real estate investor and educator. I'm bringing you the most successful military, veteran, and military spouse real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and industry experts to break down exactly how they did it, so you can too. ADPI. Here we are, another episode with another one of our members, right? So sometimes we bring on awesome guests that are not maybe even a part of the military community, but they provide so much value with their background, their experience, and their stories. And sometimes we recognize that the best way to instill confidence and actually get somebody off their butt and taking action is bringing in one of our members that has done it themselves, has succeeded in I always put myself in somebody else's shoes, and it's like almost I'm living vicariously through them, and I'm so excited for the successes that I'm seeing them getting. And so for me, this is such an awesome opportunity to bring Landon Fillmore on, who I met about a year and a half ago in San Antonio at our second conference. We're actually going to be going back to San Antonio this year, October 10th through the 12th, by the way. It's called Mil Recon, if you guys want to get a ticket. But Landon Fillmore, I remember you talking to people. I remember you taking action. I remember you asking me questions about education and how to, I remember those little bits and pieces. And the next thing I know, you're jumping in head first. Next thing I know, you're posting pictures about you closing on a property. And I can't wait to dive into that story, because now you're not even in the States, you're stationed overseas. So welcome, Landon. Say hello. How are you doing today, man?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark-Ian. Yeah, doing great. Yeah, coming from Italy on this episode. Last time, I guess you didn't mention, but yeah, I was on the podcast once before with Kevin right after
yeah.
ADPICon 2023. He put kind of that plug at the end of the conference of, hey, if anyone out there is interested, sign up to be on the podcast. And I was like, hey, you know what? Like, I only have a single property behind me, but hopefully that's enough to at least, have a conversation about. And that was in Alaska with Kevin, and now, yeah, here in Italy this time. But that's just what the military does for you. It takes you all over the place and gives you chances to buy properties along the way, right? So
yeah, no, I thank you for reminding me. That was a kind of like, so at ADPICon we always try to do these things where it's like, hey, let's see who's going to jump and spring into action, and that's exactly what happened. It's kind of like, I always talk about the confidence moments, the dominoes. They kind of keep falling. Like all these little things are like micro commitments in yourself that you're like, okay, you keep solidifying your own new identity as a real estate agent, or as a real estate investor, excuse me, right? And that's awesome. So can you rewind us a little bit? Let's start like, I say this sometimes, like, how did Landon Fillmore, like, how did you become who you are today? Where are you from? What's your background? Why did you even come to ADPICon and get into real estate? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start out, I would say, first of all, yep, I'm from Utah, so out in the West a little bit, a state that like a lot of people don't even know where it is or know people that are from there. But yeah, I grew up in Utah, went to Utah Valley University, and ended up joining the ROTC program. Was never part of my plans at all. But as I got going along in college, and I actually got married while I was in college, my wife's family was military affiliated. Her grandpa had been in 3 different services over a 20-something year career as a warrant officer.
Wow. Okay.
So definitely part of their family, and it had kind of come up in some conversations of, hey, have you ever thought about ROTC? Have you ever thought about the military as a way to pay for your college? So at that point in my life, investing, real estate, none of that was on my radar either. So just kind of started talking to recruiters, talked to some guy on campus and that was in a uniform walking around, and I thought, that's kind of weird that you're coming to college classes in your military uniform. But after talking to him, joined the ROTC program, ended up commissioning in 2021, active duty Army. I'm a medical service corps officer. So that's kind of the admin and, administrative management side of medical Army. From the combat units, the airborne brigade combat teams, stuff like that, where I was in Alaska before this, to the hospitals and the clinics, just kind of managing the back end of all that. And now I'm in Italy, like I said, in Vicenza. Super excited to be here with my family. I've got a wife and two kids, so we're trying to figure out how to
Woohoo!
live in Europe a little bit. It's kind of crazy. It's different than coming on vacation. But
Yeah.
along the way, as I finished up college, I started catching pieces of investing. I started hearing a little bit more about it. This vocabulary that I had never heard before started kind of coming up more and more amongst my friends. People that I worked with, they were kind of talking about stocks, and it was just before COVID. And I wish looking back now that of course, dove in a little sooner. But I was on a hike with a friend who got talking to me about investing. After that hike, kind of just thoughts in my mind. I went to Google, just kind of Googled the best ways to invest, and it was like the most classic start ever into real estate investing, where I just
Yeah.
found bigger pockets, Googled like how do you invest, what is investing, and real estate was an option, and then that kind of kickstarted it all from there to listening to podcasts, and eventually led to buying some properties as I started getting to my first duty station. So
Super cool. Yeah, it's funny. I think I think the first thing I Googled when I realized, I kind of want to make more money was, I think it was like how to make passive income. Like, I think that's what I think that's what I Googled, no kidding. And I think that's when I found Pat Flynn. I don't know if anybody who's into Pokemon, like my kids
okay.
are. Pat Flynn is, I know this is totally
Not what I
random, but like
expected. Yeah.
Pokemon is like, dude, this is like all the rage right now. So this guy was my absolute, like, so Tim Ferriss, Robert Kiyosaki, right? Most
Yep.
people know who
Yep.
they are, right? Tim Ferriss, amazing podcast, wrote the 4 Hour Work Week, changed my life. So many other entrepreneurs got started because of that book. Robert Kiyosaki, the godfather of real estate, right? Let's be honest. I mean, the Purple Bible has inspired so many
For
of us.
sure.
But then there's this guy named Pat Flynn, who learned how to make websites and make passive income online. And he started this podcast called SPI, Smart Passive Income. By the way, I kept thinking about the name Smart Passive Income, and that's what helped me come up with ADPI. I was like,
Okay.
wait, we're active. Yeah, I was like, wait, we're active duty, but we want to make passive income. The play on words and me being
It's
active duty at the
perfect.
time, obviously ADPI is for all, veterans, military spouses, the whole military community. But it was just, it kind of just, I was inspired by that guy. So, but yeah, so I remember I found him and I found his podcast because I was looking that up. I still remember some of the episodes that like blew my mind when I like connected the dots. I was like, wait, that's how you make money. I was like, because up until then I was just staring at the military pay chart every day. I was like, I guess this is it. Like, this is what I'm gonna make, and in 2 years I'm gonna make that, and then in 2 years I'm gonna make. So wow, but yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to share because it's funny. I think a lot of us start off by just having a little bit of curiosity. You don't know what to Google. You Google the most vague thing, like how do I invest, or what
What
is
is
passive income,
investing
and
in
then it
real?
kind
Yeah.
yeah. So exactly, and then you find the big players, like the bigger pockets. You find Robert Kiyosaki, and then you kind of start finding what you want to focus on. You start gravitating towards people like yourself, and maybe that's kind of what got you stumbled into ADPI. But that's really, really cool. So you said that, when you came to ADPI Con, which, like I mentioned, we're now rebranding to Military Real Estate Investing Conference, or MilReCon, another play on words. You you said you already owned a property when you got there?
Yeah, so by then, I had already kind of jumped into the community a little bit. First on the Facebook group, which I think is probably a lot of people, if they've heard of active duty
Yeah.
passive income. When I first found the Facebook group, I looked in there and like mutual friends wise, I had like 50 something people I was friends with already in the military that were in this Facebook group.
Like,
And I started talking to her and like asking about it, like, have you guys heard about this thing? And they're like, oh yeah, it's this Facebook group. People get on and ask questions. I'm like, no, it's so much more. Like, you don't realize it's not just like a bunch of moms on there, like, or dads on there talking about like random questions. This is like a community and, turns out a company, education, everything. But I started in
yeah,
the Facebook
yeah.
and just started seeing, posts from the team about the conference, and I found the podcast eventually, and I was a die-hard Bigger Pockets guy, like Brandon Turner, David Green days of Bigger Pockets. I mean, I started day one, started listening to the Rookie podcast as well with Ashley, and she had a few different co-hosts as well. But anyway, diehard Bigger Pockets guy. That's where I started, made an account with their forums, started networking with random people, and I started creating keyword alerts for military or active duty. And
Oh, okay, okay.
that's what I thought. That's the echo chamber that I thought existed online for military and real estate was like, there's got to be people on Bigger Pockets somewhere that are also military real estate investors. And little did I know there's
Yeah,
this whole.
yeah, yeah.
So I was happy when I stumbled upon that. And so by the time I went to ADP Icon at the time in 2023, I had two properties. I had a fourplex in Anchorage,
Okay.
Alaska that I bought with an FHA loan in 2021. So right as I commissioned, I was still in my basic officer leader course. I found the property, networked with an agent who was in Alaska, and ended up closing on it while I was TDY, I think in Texas, still in San Antonio, 3 months prior to actually reporting to Alaska. So sight unseen completely,
Wow.
so a little nerve-wracking at first, and a lot of people said I'm absolutely crazy. And now looking back, I would have been absolutely crazy to say no to that opportunity. I'm so glad when I did. Obviously, hindsight, interest rates with where they were, you don't see a 2.99% interest rate anymore. But anyway, so
Oh
bought the
my
fourplex
goodness.
with an
No,
FHA loan. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
can I just hone in on that a little bit? Like I
Yeah.
just, I think sometimes somebody looking from the outside listening to a story, and especially when I hear you talk, and like I know you've been on the podcast before, but I really want to just treat this as like, hey, nobody knows you. Let's just start from scratch and really dig in, because there's certain moments that I'm fascinated by. Is like, what made you do it? Every step, every little, like, because I think a lot of people, it seems so trivial, but those little things, like enough little issues, or like, oh, my parents are going through this, or oh, I'm gonna move then that year. These little hangups, these little friction points, literally stop you from changing your life. Sometimes it sounds so cliche, and like I'm not trying to be grandiose with what I'm saying, but like it's true. And so, but yet, sight unseen, something made you do it. Like what was it like your spouse was like, hey man, buy a
Oh
house, like a
no, no, the
fourplex?
opposite
Or
of that.
was it like Brandon? Like what was it? Okay, so the opposite of that. Okay, I want to dig into that, like how,
Yeah.
because that's a, how does the family unit make decisions? That's always a hang up too, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So for you, what was it? Was it you're just like, I'm sick of indecision, I want to go big? Like what was
Yeah.
it?
So while I was in college, I started having the idea of buying a home with the intent to rent it someday, kind of just real estate investing, super basics 101. And at the time I was still in Utah, I was trying to like find a way to buy a home in Utah because Utah's actually a pretty bananas market. Like it's appreciation wise, it's a really, really awesome place to own property. And so I really wanted to try to buy something while I was in college. I was looking at condos and townhomes that were like 200 something, and it just didn't work out. I was unemployed in college. Turns out you need to have a job usually to qualify for a loan. Little did I know. But over time, the confidence and really, I guess, just the like maybe brash confidence, what it turned out to be, just came from again kind of building that vocabulary over time by listening to constant podcasts. I mean, just like binging every single drive. I had like a 45-minute drive to work from where I was working at the time. And so I was getting through 3 or 4 Bigger Pockets podcast episodes a week. And so I was
Yeah,
doing
man.
things like writing. I remember pulling over in the side of my car, or in my car, pulling over to the side of the road and pulling open the notes app and writing, what is turnkey? What is amortization? And I kind of just started creating this glossary of terms that I didn't know yet as I heard these episodes going on and on. Certainly, I think just absorbing, and maybe that's just the way I learn, is just hearing it over and over again. But the thing I came back to the most, and maybe this is the actual answer to your question, was the idea that like if they can do it, why can't I? If someone out there that I consider myself to be a fairly competent and like somewhat intelligent person, if I have gotten to my point myself in life to this point so far, why couldn't I also figure out how to buy a fourplex,
Yeah,
live in
man.
one unit, and rent out the other three?
So I okay, and I know this might seem like, again, I'm just going too deep into this one thing, but I really think there's value here. First of all, I want to say I started the same way. I literally, I will challenge everybody that's listening to this right now that everybody can start the same way and build their confidence through education, through the simple listening of podcasts. I actually, and I remember the second or third article I ever wrote when I first launched the website was called Automobile University. I kid you not. It was called Automobile University, and all I did was podcast books, podcast books, podcast books. And I was just like, through osmosis, just shoving information into my brain. You know, first of all, I had like an hour and a half commute sometimes from like Oceanside to Miramar. But second of all, I didn't know how else to go learn this stuff. And that just seemed like such a gift to have the best people in the whole world. It's like them giving you coaching calls for free, just laying it out there. And it's not tailored maybe to you, but actually I found that very valuable because I have a very creative side of my brain. I would like to listen to like 10 different stories and piece it together and be like, I could do something my way, this way. And like, I would create my own little recipe. Right. And so, you know, I'm obsessed with like building confidence. So to me, what that was is you were playing a sport. You were getting reps in. That's you listening to your coach. That's you imagining so in flight school, we had to do what's called chair flying, right? The military does not have a big enough budget to let you go on unlimited flights or go on unlimited simulations of flights, right? So what they tell you to do is swallow your ego, sit in a chair, close your eyes, and pretend you're doing it. And they say, it was so hard for me to actually say the things out loud, like the radio calls. I was like, I sound like an idiot. But what you're doing, like, if I can, I don't know, voice what I think I saw what you're describing is you're basically chair flying. You're listening to all these people do these things and you're like imagining yourself do it. You're getting practice without even doing it. And then you're getting more comfortable with the language, which, by the way, when you go talk to a real estate agent, a broker, a future partner, a lender, and these things roll off the tongue confidently, they are going to be that much more willing and probably going to help you and work with you because nobody wants to waste their time. It's all about confidence of getting the deal done. If you have a lender that feels like they know what you're talking about or you're excited enough, they're probably going to spend time on your file to close that loan for you. Whereas if somebody's like, this kid doesn't know what they're doing, they're not going to help you. Right? Would you agree? Is that kind of what was happening to you, like mentally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the confidence to be able to call up a real estate agent that I, got randomly referred to from someone I met on Facebook that knew a guy in Alaska that had some rental properties, and they were like, "Hey, I know someone who's an agent," and just so to call a complete stranger on the other side of the country and start talking real estate and start talking, "Hey, not only do I want to maybe buy a home in this place I've never been to before, I want to buy a fourplex, and by the way, I want you to walk through it for me." And like all of this work that goes into being a real estate agent that is never paid if the deal doesn't get done. So 100%, like the confidence that professional is going to have in you relies completely, in this case, on my voice to be able to convey, this is my idea.
On your
This is what
confidence.
100%, because otherwise if I just called her up and was like,
Right?
"Hey, I'd just really love to like have some sort of home that I can hopefully live in and also like have other people pay me to live there, and I think it's called like house hacking or something," and just having that confidence instead to say, "Hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Here's my buy box. I want this much. I've already been looking online on the MLS and this is the area I want to be in. I know I'm going to pre-qualify for this amount because I've heard and I already know that I can qualify 75% of the rental income of the other units toward my own DTI." Explaining all that to someone who isn't even a real
Boom,
estate
right?
investor themselves, like,
Boom.
boom, they're like, bet. Like, here's the list of all the properties that meet your buy box, and a few weeks later, we're under contract and we're ready to close before I even go to the place. So,
You know what? That was awesome. See, like, guys, if you're listening to this, he just said all those things, pretending he was like. I bet you were imagining talking to that agent again, and it just rolled off your tongue. That projected massive confidence because there was no hesitation in what you were saying. You know what I also like to do? Here's a little golden nugget. Here's how I like to, because you know what it is, Landon, is it's also like sales, right? You're selling this person on buying you. Their form of currency is them
their
spending
time.
time on you.
Totally.
right? They're buying you, and so like they're picking up what you're putting down, and so you're basically selling them on working with you, and so I what I have done for a very long time, and it's done well for me, but it's also shot me in the foot sometimes, so I have to be careful. Is I I talk about the future a lot, so I'm like I almost act like the way I show like absolute resolution and confidence in what I'm talking about is I almost say it as if it's matter of fact, and I focus on the next steps afterwards. So I'll be like, yeah, we're going to submit an LOI on this, on this 72 unit or whatever, but I really want to buy the next two properties this seller has. I can tell he's not taking care of them, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'll just like say, like, boom, I'm already talking step 2, 3, and 4. Meanwhile, the broker's like imagining, oh, there's another commission. There's another commission. I want to work with this
Yeah.
person. This person's going to give me financial value that is way more than just this transaction right now. This is a transformational
There you
relationship,
go.
if
I
you
love
will.
that. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
turning that from, because real estate agent's profession is completely centered by nature around the transaction. And so if you're going to be working with an agent, of course, there's all these off-market ways to find a property. You can go and, build your own list, send direct mail, do all these things to circumvent the whole agent thing in general. But as a buyer, especially like if you're listening to this and you've never ever purchased a property before and you didn't know, it doesn't cost you anything until the day you close, and maybe there's down payment or closing costs, but that agent is going to be your advocate and working with the other agent or working with the seller directly to help you buy that home. And so the seller, most of the time, laws have recently changed, but most of the time the seller is paying those fees. But anyway, yeah, to turn that into a vision conversation instead with an agent and say, hey, this is where I'm going and this is what I want to do. I'm a real estate investor, not just a future home buyer. That's going to show them, oh, this person is going to keep doing this. This is someone I want to maintain touch with and bring them deals and get them involved in, yes, like transformational relationship now instead of I'm going to get them to the finish line of this transaction and then move on to the next one.
Love it. And is that what because I know you like talking about the importance of a powerful conversation. Is there something you want to add on top of that? Like, has there been a pivotal, powerful conversation in your life that maybe recently or that you just want to highlight?
Yeah. This skips ahead in the story a little bit, and we don't have enough time to go through maybe like the full story beginning to end. But the one conversation that changed a lot for me was the conversation that changed a lot for me recently was when I was in the position to either sell my home in Alaska that I was living in or
Mm,
keep it as a rental somehow and PCS and maintain part of my VA loan utilized since I'm going overseas and I can't buy a primary residence over here. I didn't want
right.
100% of my VA entitlement sitting unused for 3 years. I might as well be building equity somewhere, hopefully cash flowing. So last resort is I really, really don't want to have to sell my home. What ended up happening was in a actually mandatory wellness check type conversation with a mental health counselor, meaning every single person that's stationed in Alaska at J-Bear in Anchorage, because it's just kind of a harder place to be stationed sometimes, the darkness in the winter can be
Yeah,
tough.
yeah, yeah.
They have mandatory wellness checks where they bring everybody in and you have to sign up for a time and talk to a counselor. And whether that turns into repeat visits or not, you just have to check the box. We have check the box trainings all the time. So in this case, that's what it was. And I got talking in here just about, I'm PCSing soon, and here's something that's weighing on my mind and it's been a little stressful is thinking about this home that I
Okay.
own that I don't want to have to sell, but I feel like I'm going to have to. And she was like, oh, wait, you live in Eagle River? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh, well, I have some colleagues that are here with me working on a year-long basis, year to year. They're contractors. They're not even from Alaska. They're just there to work as contractors for the Army on base. I have coworkers that really want to find a home to live in Eagle River that's a fully furnished rental. And let me put you in touch with the corporate housing company that puts all of us contractors into homes for 1 year at a time. And I was
Woohoo!
like, okay. And Markian, what that turned into was me being able to rent my home that was going to be complete negative cash flow for me. Like I wasn't going to be able to rent it for enough to actually, walk away with any amount of cash flow to suddenly cash flowing $500 or $600 a month as I move away from Alaska
Whoa,
on a
dude.
single family condo, because I left it furnished and
Wow.
a
So
corporate rental company puts people in it. So a single conversation, right, that you're just casually talking about, in fact, my problems and my stressors in life at the time, transformed into a door that opened that allowed me to retain a property for at least 3 years while I'm away and cash flow of $500 a month on a single home.
wow. So we are going to dig into that really deep, but real
Yeah,
quick, what you're saying is A, that was a powerful conversation, but B, kind of to the previous thing we talked about is it's probably you were just ready for that conversation, and this is like people say, like, luck is the intersection
yeah,
of preparation and opportunity or whatever. You were already you were like positioned, and because that opportunity presented itself, you were able to execute. You were able to be like, boom, yes, I kind of understand, I'm going to keep the furniture there, here's what I need it to be. And you were able to like not let anybody else swoop in, but actually capitalize on the situation.
yeah, yep. Just like eye-opening moment for me to realize that, like, man, like a single conversation that I never even expected to go that direction turned into
Yeah, a wellness
potentially
check, right?
yeah, a check the box wellness check. Go and talk to this counselor and tell her how you're doing here in Alaska turns into this awesome rental opportunity. So,
So let's talk about the actual mechanics there for a second. So last year when we were in Colorado, we for ADP Icon for our conference, we had Brandon Turner come and speak, and it was really cool because the team at ADPI, we got to eat lunch with him before his talk, and we just that was probably the most valuable part for me, was just to pick the guy's brain, as they say, right? We were just anything. Everybody dreams of that moment to like take somebody that you look up to for a coffee to pick their brain, quote unquote, right? By the way, guys, that doesn't always work. But and here he was, we're eating sandwiches and just talking to the dude. And one of the things he said is that because of everything that's been happening in the market and with the interest rates and everything, his mindset is changing from will it cash flow to how can I make it cash flow, right? So one conversation, one question is pigeonholing you into like what seems like an unwinning situation. Sometimes if it doesn't cash flow, you run the numbers in a spreadsheet, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, property management, maintenance, vacancies, and reserves, boom. And then if it doesn't cash flow, you feel stuck. The other conversation is, wait, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what a spreadsheet says. I'm an entrepreneur. I am here to problem solve. How do I make it cash flow? Right? There's two reasons for that. A, you're gonna start making money in any situation. If you always think like, okay, I don't want to hear no, I want to hear how, you're gonna make more money, period. And the other part is when that does happen, you're giving yourself another ounce of confidence, right? Now you're gonna have that positive mental feedback loop that next time there's what seems like this isn't gonna work situation, to how can I make it work, right? And I guess what I'm saying is your property was one of those kind of. And yes, I mean, yes, this was an opportunity that kind of like you almost stumbled into, but you were prepared for. But for everybody listening there, I think this is a lesson. This is another one of those hows. Maybe you can't just straight up long-term rental the usual way, but maybe you can do what Landon is doing. Maybe you can rent out a corner of your garage for storage for $100 a month. What can you do? What are things that you can layer in? Maybe a parking spot somebody needs. Like, who knows? Maybe you can, rent by the room. Maybe you can. There's a million things that you can get creative. But within your situation, would you say like, is this kind of like a midterm rental? Like, and guys, if you're hearing this, he's calling it a corporate lease. What does that mean, Landon? And is it kind of midterm rental? Is it long-term still? Can you give us the mechanics there?
yeah. This one is kind of a hybrid of midterm, long term, and corporate. And I guess here's why. My tenant is an LLC. It's a company who places their clients into homes. So my tenant on the paper on the lease is this company, the corporate housing company. The person living in the home is a working professional. So in that case, it's a midterm rental because they're not going to be there long term, but it is long term in the sense that because of this person, this specific contractor who is in Alaska at that time working on the military base, her goal is to keep that job in that place for as long as possible. So my lease with the corporate housing company is a year-long lease, but it's a fully furnished property because we did Airbnb in the basement while we lived there, first of all. So we kind of half house hacked the summertime in Alaska. That's kind of the only time most people go to Alaska. But we house hacked the Airbnb bottom two floors of our condo. It was a weird layout. It was 4 floors tall,
That's so
and
cool though.
it was awesome. And so we were able to
Why,
turn
why are
this
you
bottom
saying half house hacked? That is like as house hack as it gets, man.
because I guess it was 3 months out of the year instead of so like all in all,
Okay.
it's not like it was constant and but it did absolutely supplement the mortgage. And walking away at the end of the summer, I was like, sweet. Like we had,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
I'm a super host now on Airbnb. I had a bunch of these good reviews.
Hell yeah.
So it was awesome for that reason. So anyway, it was half done already. We just took those beds, moved them upstairs. We PCSing was an absolute mess because we had to decide what was going into storage, what was going in unaccompanied baggage, what was PCSing to Italy, and what was staying in the home. And then also, if we're taking something to Italy, let's run to Walmart, Costco, wherever we can, or Amazon, and replace that stuff so that it's fully furnished and decorated. Also, let's send our stuff across the world. And like, it was a mess. But
Oh,
um,
military life.
yeah, we love it. But so that's what it came down to. It's a long-term rental in the sense that it's a year-long lease, but it's a corporate rental
Okay.
because the tenant is an LLC and the person living in it is a contractor that was placed there by the corporate rental.
Is there any room you think to increase the lease every year with these people? With this
Renewing it.
corporation?
Yep. And that's the
Yeah, so when
goal
you
is
renew
that
it, do you think you can,
like
maybe
increase
you can
the
start cash flowing $800 next year?
yeah. Yep, I think so. I think because this one happens, not all midterm rentals or corporate rentals are contracted with the government in any way. Most of them maybe are travel nurses, big corporations out there. So this one's a little unique because it's affiliated in some way back to the DoD, which I never really sought out
Mm.
necessarily. So I say
Mm-hmm.
that to say, like, we also know the current climate and the way that a lot of things, executive orders, who knows what can really
Right, right,
change a
right,
budget
right.
on the turn of a dime. So I am thinking in the back of my head all the time as well, like, okay, I need to make sure I have my next strategy ready to go. I need an exit if I have to, because if this program that has these contractors in that area suddenly goes away because the money disappears, I'm out of a tenant and now I have to figure something else out. But
So let's talk about that. If somebody's listening to this right now and they want to figure out how they can get a corporate lease similar to yours, or a traveling, or a handful of traveling nurses paying by the room or whatever, I'm imagining you're kind of pretending you're thinking ahead. What if this disappears? How are you going to find the next tenant that's going to cash flow for you? So
yeah,
that somebody that's listening to this could be like, I'm going to do those same things. I'm going to research the way Landon's doing it.
yeah. Well, what's cool is just in the last couple of years, I think the midterm rental space in general and like has become a thing, first of all, like a term.
Yeah.
It's blown up. I mean, just the last episode that has aired that I listened to was with Betty, right? And Betty Boyce, like she's a champion of the midterm strategy. But there's a lot of people out there that are doing it and realizing that as short-term regulations continue to clamp down and Airbnbs are looked at more and more critically in these different markets, you know, usually that legislation turns into a 30-day or less lease is considered a short term, and
Right,
that's what they
right,
clamp
right.
down on. And so there's a lot of advantages here to having a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, or for me, up to a year long lease. But there's so many different ideas out there between, like we said, traveling medical professionals. You have in this case the government contractors. There's just normal. I have another corporate rental actually that I inherited in my fourplex in Alaska that's a oil and mining company up somewhere, and so whenever they have people flying in and out of Anchorage, they need a place for them to stay for a night. I happen to inherit as a tenant when I bought that fourplex that unit. So there's another example. It's just a big
Oh,
company
okay.
who has employees that need to fly in, and it's cheaper for them to have a
Is there a
$2,000
website
a
to
month.
find?
There's lots of
Sorry,
them.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
No, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, can you drop a few resources? Like if somebody wants to find like is it as simple as like, I don't know, is it like a midterm matchmaking website? Is there a place you can list your midterm rentals easily that you'd recommend?
not as much probably as things like Zillow rentals and your normal long-term, use turbo tenant, post it on 50 different sites. It's going to maybe require a little bit more effort on your end to find things like Furnished Finder, obviously. A lot of, or maybe not obviously, if you've never heard of that before. Furnished Finder's
I've heard of it, but like but that's a good example, right?
yeah,
Potentially.
yeah, Furnished Finder.
And okay.
Facebook groups are huge. I think travel nurses, especially if you're looking, if you just in the search bar on Facebook look up travel nurse and your city or state, you're going to find groups where people are posting ahead of time saying, hey, in 3 months from now, me and my girlfriend are coming into town for 3 months and we want a room together. We're looking for this kind of a home. And not off the top of my head, I don't have any other like specific websites besides Furnish
That's
Finder.
fine. That's
But
fine. I'm just yeah.
yeah, and the other, I guess, idea that I recently have had and I've heard more and more about is the insurance tenants as well. And so that's something I'm going to be digging
Mhm.
into and trying to make sure
Mhm.
I'm on the list for these insurance placement companies for as people get displaced out of their homes, they're looking for a furnished home for, 3, 4 months and they can pay
Right.
a lot more than you normally get. But
I actually just heard of somebody doing that in Alaska, and then somebody here in our community in Florida as well. I believe they were. I mean, their mortgage was like 3,000, but the insurance company was paying them like 8 grand because essentially it's a midterm rental that you're giving to somebody who lost their home due to a natural disaster, right? So like, or God forbid something whatever happened, right? Like a hurricane, tornado,
higher.
forest fire, whatever the case may be. Yeah. So, an accident at home, I don't know, gas leak. Yeah. So like the home's ruined and they can't live there. Insurance, their policy has that rider or whatever you call it, where it's like, replacement of dwelling rental, situation. And boom, they put you in and they're able to pay a premium because they need a quick solution for your family, which is what you paid for as the insured, right? So that's the give and take there. So I think that's where this current state of the market is forcing the creativity in this direction, right? Is to find that sweet spot between, hey, maybe it's not a short-term rental that is really a pretty active business you have to deal with, right? But it's also not just like super chill, like long-term rental. You got to you got to furnish it. You got to, be on the lookout for the next tenant, right? Kind of thing. But I mean, it's so worth it. You went from potentially being negative cash flow to being like $500, $600 positive, but also the kind of like the effect of this is you're now learning more and more about this space and you're probably going to be doubling down on it and making even more cash flow. I mean, Betty Boyce, like, holy cow, 8 grand in what, a couple of years of monthly cash flow, some of it from her VA loans. Like what a dream, you know?
Amazing. It's that small but mighty portfolio idea, right? For her especially.
I
I love
know.
that. I think sometimes we hear these guests that come on and they say, "Oh, I've got, 13 million or 13 million assets under management or I have, 300 rental units." But you can do a lot of amazing things in your life and set yourself up completely financially free with 5 core portfolio properties that are just crushing it for you. And if you have that strategy nailed down, like why blow your portfolio up to a size where you can't sleep at night when, especially in her case, they're more or less all on the same street. But yeah, just
Yeah.
that small but mighty, that's powerful.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So I remember you joined our military multifamily academy. So guys, for those who do not know, ADPI, we have two primary educational tracks. We have for those that want to focus mostly on residential and maybe do not necessarily want to go all in on real estate, but you do want to invest in real estate smartly, like buy a home at every duty station if you can, buy a rental here and there, get a fourplex, whatever, house hack. And then there's those that we like, say, hey, this is the all-in method, which there's many different methods. You can do flipping homes, you can do wholesaling, you can do short-term rental all in. But ADPI's choice of all-in program was what we developed as our commercial multifamily program, which is we call MMA or the Military Multifamily Academy. And we run cohorts there because we believe the first step is to build a team. And so anyway, you know, it sounds like what you have found that, you know, you're moving to Italy, you got this and that going on, you have a family that was not something that spoke to you or aligned with your goals as much as what I'm seeing. You wanted to focus more on residential midterm rentals. Now it seems like, you know, getting a fourplex here and there and scaling that way, that's what's building your momentum. That's what you wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
After you
Um,
identified it, right? You got exposed to all of it, right? And you're like, you know what? This is what I'm going to focus on.
Markion, this was probably the like most insecure point in my real estate investing journey. Granted, like I'm only four to
Really?
5 years into this, but I say that because insecure in the sense that as far as like fake it till you make it and talking about stuff that you like haven't done yet or that like I felt like I kind of got real estate investing 101 down. I had a fourplex, I had a single family home, I had done some Airbnb, I had a corporate rental. So there's some residential stuff I had figured out. Then I go to ADP Icon, I go to the military or the MMA breakout, I learn about commercial real estate investing, and suddenly, okay, here's a whole new glossary of terms. Here's a whole new vocabulary that I need to, not need to, but I can learn and I can go this route if I choose to, right? We talk about choose your path, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, whether it's whatever. And,
Whatever in between. Yeah.
and it's so many things. I committed pretty hard, and you know, of course, we have to commit and take action. I committed pretty hard to the commercial route. I posted on Facebook. I was making all the things like and that was super uncomfortable for me to like open myself up to my family and friends to say, "Hey, here's the direction I'm going now. I am." And I had deleted my Facebook or my Instagram at least because I just got sick of social media in general. I had like made a
Yeah. Yeah.
official
Yeah.
post about like, hey, like I'm gonna take a break from social media for a while. Bye. Get in touch with me if you need me. And then I went through this whole MMA education program and realized, man, the like power of social media. So I made this like awkward return back to it, started making posts again of like, hey, you know, like about that whole post of me leaving Instagram behind, like I'm back and here's why. And so I did the cohort with the MMA. I had a really good experience with it. I met some phenomenal people that were in it the same reasons I was, and we're committed. We were taking action. We were, you know, we got to the point where we were niching down into hotels and boutique hotels. We were calling up brokers that were specializing in that with my team. And the more and more I got into it, and I started trying to capital raise for other syndications and things, I found myself just talking this vocabulary and this language of commercial real estate and capital raising with people that I knew that were my friends and family, and I felt super uncomfortable. And that's where the insecurity part came in, where
Okay.
um, at the time, I think I realized that yes, this is a way to do it, and yes, it can be a phenomenal opportunity for myself as a general partner or a manager of the deal, but also like presenting these amazing opportunities to other people to invest in. But I just kind of realized, and I think I came back to the uneasiness that like, wait a second, like the whole reason I started this and the whole focus that I had was for these first few years of my military career was having control over the properties that I own to focus on cash flow personally. And while you can absolutely experience cash flow and amazing net worth and equity growth in the commercial real estate side of things, I had to make that difficult decision with that cohort team that I was already well on our way with to take a couple steps back and have that difficult conversation with them to say the way my phase of life is right now, the PCS that's upcoming, and the reasons I got into real estate in the first place are a little bit more focused on my own personal portfolio that is small maybe in numbers, but is powerful at least in the fact that I have complete control and ownership over it. And I can make a decision all by myself in my own chamber, and that's the direction I go instead of having to confer with a large team of other people. And there's certainly a place for all of those things, and I absolutely expect and commit, here over the podcast that I will get into commercial real estate at some point.
Mm.
Um, but the phase of life I was in, the upcoming move, and the time I wanted to be able to commit to my team, because it's only fair to them that I am able to, be an active and a contributing part of that team. I just didn't feel like it was the
Yeah.
right time.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took those steps back. And it was amazing to see as soon as I realigned with my immediate why and my goals and what I set out to do, how quickly things turned around from where
Yeah.
that was probably like October-ish or October 2024 when I really decided to take like a full step back and away from the commercial hustle and focus again on residential. That's when I was able to open this door into the midterm for my home in Alaska, and then actually was able to start networking with some people within ADPI that were absolutely killing it in the residential space. Shout out to Lorna Neely, right? She's one of the amazing mentors in the ADPI community. And talking with her and like reanalyzing my goals and her helping me be comfortable with the fact that it's okay not to do the big crazy deals and like just focus back on what you are familiar with and what you're passionate about. And then just a few months later, January 3rd, 2025, I closed on a fourplex in the Midwest that I had also never been to with a partner who I had talked with for a long time about different business things. And suddenly, because I was just talking more confidently about it, and I said, hey, here's my vision, I'm going to buy this fourplex somewhere, he jumped on board and we split it 50-50. And in a matter of months, I suddenly had a midterm rental lined up and a fourplex in another state closed before I PCS to Italy. And it was just a reaffirming moment for me
Wow.
to realize, man, like re-identifying those goals and being okay, like sticking with those, even though all the shiny object syndromes come along, um, was able to like see pretty immediate results, and I feel super grateful for that.
Yeah, Landon. I mean, guys, when you're listening to this, what I want you to hear is that it's it's okay if things don't go exactly how you imagined. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody kind of has heard that a million times. But this is living proof. Like I love commercial real estate. That is my thing. I love the deal making. I love being able to what feels like build a company, versus real estate. I enjoy that. But I also know that you can go all in real estate. It can be you could go all in on turnkeys. You could just buy ready to go properties one after the other and build a massive portfolio and ride off into the sunset and become a millionaire that way. You can do it with short-term rentals. You can do it wholesaling. It's just the way ADPI, the way we do our education, because we had to focus on what our goals are, how we were going to impact the military communities. We were like, okay, for us, our residential track, just because it typically works out that way when people are first finding out and maybe do not want to commit all in, it's typically residential. And then of all the different options, like you can be like Lauren Neely and have like a very tremendous portfolio of single family homes, right? Or like I said, you could go commercial. So our all in program is commercial. And so I would just say, like, I think, you don't need to hear me say this, but I understand why you're insecure, but I would be, I don't know. I would be encouraged, and I think it took a lot of courage to make the right decision for yourself, because it is difficult to sometimes make pivots that make you feel like your identity's changing a little bit. It's the same reason why it's so difficult for people to even think about real estate or entrepreneurship when you're doing full-time military stuff. You're like, wait a second, is this really me? You almost feel like you're betraying the previous identity of yours, right? But I think that I'm hoping that, like, I think once you find something, really just double down. Really just get to the top of that Mount Everest. Like I'm imagining myself, if I were you, if you still want, like you're saying this on the podcast, you still want to do commercial real estate. My thought to you, my coaching moment would be like, don't until you reach your Mount Everest. Get to like whatever the number is. Don't look anywhere. Just put the blinders on and then jump, or then do something else, or then do commercial, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And as far as like the identity goes behind these things, and we post it on our social media accounts, and we get on LinkedIn and we, blast it out to the world to say, I am a commercial real estate investor, right? And we jump in these calls full of other people on Zoom or whatever, and you try to identify with it as much as possible. And if it clicks and it sticks, that's awesome, and like charge forward. And at the same time, like in the same way that the military does, like there's such a sense of identity tied up in the military. And not that I was betraying myself to say I'm a commercial real estate investor, but I think I was just a little bit like betraying, like, okay, here's what my goals are and that like felt the truest to me, and let me stick to those for now. And I think it's just there's timing for everything. There's truly the right time
Yeah.
for everything, and there's no saying exactly when that's going to be.
It's
The
also a
day will.
discovery. I mean, this is just a natural discovery process. Like you
It is.
just, it's just discovery. Like you found out, oh, course correcting and it's okay. Like
Yeah,
it's
and
totally okay.
we say the same thing in the military even, right? Where like MOS changes, or people hear about, oh wait, I can be a pilot in the military. Let me go warrant and switch over. And like I had a medic friend in Alaska who, is leaving his medic self behind, and now he's gonna go be a helicopter pilot. And like there's an identity shift right
What?
there, right? So,
Yeah.
um, so
I mean, yeah, exactly. I was a pilot. I was a helicopter pilot. And then I was like, nope, not anymore. Transition to public affairs or communication strategy and operations, as they call it in the Marine Corps. But yeah, gosh, I think there's just so much value in being able to not tie yourself down to a single identity. Whether it's and that's, I think, really how I viewed the purpose of ADPI, because I was struggling so hard while I was in the military. When I got in, I was like eternally, and I've said this so many times on the podcast, but I was eternally thankful for what the United States, I mean, like America's done for my family as an immigrant, what the military has done for me and like setting me up for success. But it was almost that made me feel more guilty to think about the next step. It's almost like all of that America and the military has given me. I'm like, how dare I think about something more? Like, does that make me ungrateful? You know what I mean? And but it was pretty apparent, like fairly early on. I was like, I'm not going to do 20 years, and it's not because I'm not thankful, but because this isn't what I want to do eventually. Like, I'm going to take the uniform off eventually. It's probably going to be sooner than half of the people in my flight school class. And it's okay. It's just identity shifts are hard, you know?
that was actually going to be my
So,
question for you, was like at that time when you made
yeah.
that shift, because already you were in a lot of ways living so many people's dreams, right? Where, I mean, how many kids out there just dream of being able to fly this gigantic, powerful death machine in the sky, and to be paid to do that every day? Like, who would give that up? But what was like
I
that for you? Yeah, like what was it?
yeah, let me share that a little bit. I mean, this was, for the longest time, I didn't even want to talk about this stuff, right? I felt so guilty. It was because but like my whole life had just a series of feeling guilty. Like when I moved to the States, well, actually when I lived in Ukraine, I grew up in Ukraine pretty much till I was 15. There was like a year in Sterling, Virginia, 2 years in London when I was in kindergarten. But for the most part, I grew up in Ukraine. I was born there right before the fall of the Soviet Union. My first language was Ukrainian, and then I learned Russian on the streets playing soccer, just because Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And I've always felt guilty that I had an American passport. I had an identity crisis day one. I would come to the States and I did not fit in. Like, I remember I went to a soccer camp and I had jean shorts on. Guess who was made fun of that day? And then I'd come back to Ukraine and I'd tell my friends, "Oh my gosh, I was on this roller coaster." And they're just like, "What?" Like, America is literally Mars. Back then, America was like Mars. You saw the Die Hard movies, all this, and like, Independence Day, and people were just like, they couldn't believe it. Like, or what the moments some Ukrainians thought was fascinating was just the casual, like, B-roll footage of like an American neighborhood, and they're just like, oh my god. Like it was just, and so I already started experiencing that, like, who am I kind of thing. Then I came to this, then I got thrown into American high school, living with my grandparents. My parents stayed back in Ukraine. My dad still was working there. They hadn't repatriated, is what it's called, yet. And, again, dude, I did not fit in. I didn't get, like, at the time it was like mom jokes were all the rage. I almost punched a kid. I was like, what do you mean? You don't know my mom. I was like, what? And then I hear other people like laughing at it. And I'm like, you guys are savages. Like, what is this American high school experience that I thought was going to be so cool? And then I decided I liked having fun. I started having parties at my grandparents' house. They didn't care. They were just, they were like, oh, he's having fun. And I was like, you know what? I know this was Knoxville, Tennessee. So I was like, I'm going to go to some university in the South with a fraternity, and I'm going to have a lot of fun. And then my dad had this very interesting conversation with me in the car. It was like between my sophomore, or it was actually after, gosh, when was this? Between my sophomore and junior year, I guess. I had to start thinking about college. And he's like, because my dad went to Rensselaer for a nuclear engineer. Then he went to Harvard, and then he went to MIT on a full ride as a nuclear physicist, and he's the top meltdown expert in the world. So, like, I'm like academically always going to be in his shadow. Oh, by the way, now he has like a master's in theology and philosophy. So like, and so he's like, he sits me down. He's like, you could apply to some of these other schools. Like you could apply to Harvard or something like that. Or like, you could also apply to like the Naval Academy or West Point, but you're probably not going to get in. It's like, what do you, he tells me this. He's like, he's having and I'm like, I don't know. To this day, I don't know if he did it on purpose because he knew my personality. Like if he had incepted that. And I was like, okay, I'll show you. I'll figure this out. And mind you, like it is an intense application. I'm like doing varsity sports, club sports, AP classes, whatever. My life is hectic. Applying to the Naval Academy is like not easy. Like it involves parents. I was just like, I'm going to show you. And I applied. I got put on one of 10 kids in the entire country. I got put on the waiting list. And then randomly I got a call and I got in. And so my dad sat me down at our, and I'm sorry, I know that I'm rambling, but it kind of builds up to like how my brain was working. He like sat me, my best friend in high school was on the balcony at our spring break condo listening to my dad tell me like, you're an idiot if you don't go. And I was just like, my dad really just didn't want to pay for college, but he also was like, he knew how important it was. And so and I was like, okay, fine. Like, I get it. I won't go to, wherever and join a fraternity. And that was the best decision I ever made. I went to the Naval Academy, made the best friends. I was one of very, very few people that had the same roommates all 4 years. And we all went Marine Corps. And I had an identity crisis there. I stepped in day one wanting to be a hacker. I'm not kidding. I stepped in day one. I was like, I'm a computer nerd. I love computers. I want to do computer science. Because I had a computer science class in high school and everybody was like cheating off of me. I didn't even know it. They were like secretly tunneling into my computer's folders and like stealing all my homework. And by the way, surprise, surprise, I hate Russia. So I was like, I want to hack Russia. And so I was like, I show up to the Naval Academy. I was like, I'm going to hack Russia. And so I told everybody that. I was like, so I double majored in computer science and IT and got a minor in Russian. And I was like, that was going to be my life. And actually, I was supposed to be one of the first ever students to go to the Russian Naval Academy on an exchange program. But last second, I guess they realized, oh crap, this guy actually knows our language and he's in computer science. Maybe we shouldn't let him in. So like last minute, they pulled the rug out. But then I wasn't able to do it. The Naval Academy, they changed their rules, or the Navy Accession, however it's called. Instead of you having to do 2 years on a boat, you had to do at least 4 years and get pinned and do the whole tour before you were able to lateral transfer into cyber warfare, or back then it was called information warfare, right? And so I was like, I can't do that. I can't spend 4 years on a boat. It just wasn't going to happen. And so I had this identity crisis. I was like, this is the whole reason I went to the Naval Academy. And I had to change direction. So I went and became a Marine. So I became a Marine and I decided I wanted to fly only because I didn't want to fight for 26 different MOSs. I was like, I didn't want to be stuck with something I don't know. So I was like, I'd rather get the flight contract right out of the Naval Academy, have an assured thing. And then I did that, and And I realized that's when I had a next identity crisis. I was like, I do not like this. I was like, I'm not going to quit. I didn't like it because it's not how my brain worked. I think some people are very exceptional at like memorizing things as like checklists. And like I got C's in history, but I got like the highest grade in Calc 2. Like I would just figure things out on the fly. I'm more creative. I'm more like, I do not like checklists. I do not write like memorizing dates in a history class. I can't, my brain doesn't work that way. And so like, I'd have these checklists. I'd have to do like, it was not me. And so I started having a lot of flight anxiety. Like I hated it. I was like, it was, plus when I got to the fleet, but I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to fail. When I got to the fleet, I was only averaging 5 or 6 hours of flight hours a month, which the minimum should be 15. The minimum. On average, my instructors, all the captains and the majors when I was a lieutenant, they were telling me the good old days was like 30, 40 hours on average. And everybody loved it. So they learned to love it. So I had this, crisis where I was like, I don't enjoy this. I have terrible anxiety doing this. And I'm not getting enough time doing it. And so I needed to change jobs, and so I put what it's called like a voluntary termination of flight status. It's not punitive. I still had my wings, but I was like, I am no longer doing this MOS. So I completely switched over to public affairs or communication strategy and operations. But that's about the time in between flight school and everything is where I got the entrepreneurial bug. I think I already saw ahead. I was like, I need to start preparing because I don't know if my next job in the future, I don't know what the military is going to, I already knew, I could sense I'm not going to do full 20 years. The MOS I chose just didn't land well with me. No pun intended. It wasn't working. And I also had like this ridiculous confidence. I was like, I know I can crush something I love. So I was like, I need to find that. And yeah, and then I started researching entrepreneurship, passive income, real estate, and it was like a whole world opened up. I was like, I couldn't believe that. I felt like I didn't understand what business was. I thought it was like this big magical thing behind a closet. And then when I started reading the books, I was like, oh my God, I can figure this out, And so that's when I did the vol term and I had to sit down next to a 2-star general and explain to him, like, sir, I went to the Naval Academy because I wanted to be cyber warfare, information warfare. That did not happen. This was never really my identity. This was never in the cards. And it's funny, he actually connected me to the DCNI and I almost got directly, anyways, there's some crazy stuff that almost happened because he found out kind of like what he called my street cred. But yeah, and so I started investing in real estate and I knew I had no time to lose. So I went all the way in. Like I just convinced my parents to pull out all of their IRAs to invest in an apartment complex, which is now retiring them, but like this is your podcast, not mine, but you asked me a question and we're talking about identity. So I kind of had to give the whole story, but my life is a series of identity crises.
Well, I love your story a lot.
Yeah.
I've heard it a few times over some different podcast episodes, but not to that level, first of all. So I feel lucky to have been the one to turn the cards a little bit and draw that out of you. So I don't know how many people have heard that level of detail, but it is such a good example of I like to call it the springboard that the military is to whatever that next thing is in life, whether that's retirement, after the 20-year career and you springboard into that next phase of your life, or if it's a 4-year contract, just the one and done kind of guy, that is enough to still do amazing things for the rest of your life. And things like the VA loan that are, reusable an unlimited amount of times entitlement with an asterisk on it, right? Like the nature of the VA loan, but like I had a specialist, an E4 in Alaska. I texted him right before this podcast episode and told him I have to use him as an example, and here's why, right? So you had your
sure, let's hear it.
Crazy experience, and then he was such a good example because like he got to the end of his initial enlistment contract in Alaska as a medic, and then decides, you know what, I don't want to do active duty for a full career. He moves back to Idaho, and before he did, he and I got talking about real estate. I think he listened to like my first episode a little bit too, and we got talking more and more about it. And now he bought a duplex right when he got out. While he was still transitioning out, he used his Army W-2 income that was still there, his LESs, as proof that like, hey, I make enough money to buy a home. Got a little creative. Ended up in a duplex
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
Idaho, then moved out of that after house hacking it and is in another second home now while he's going to college working as a nurse. Anyway, just did a 4 year, like up to E4 was all like contract, and that was enough for him to now own two homes in a fantastic real estate market that's going to just completely catapult him forward, let alone like his GI benefits he's using now and all that. But like, if you don't use the springboard for what it is, like, I don't know, like it just has
Yeah,
so much power.
and forever have, yeah, forever have potentially some disability, forever have the VA loan that's reusable in his back pocket, forever have like these amazing wealth building tools that like me and Betty were talking about it. It's part of your compensation package. Do not look at the military pay chart as like, that's my compensation. No, these benefits are also wealth building tools. This is a part of your compensation. It's your delayed compensation package. Reuse that VA loan smartly. Apply for disability, because if your life is any different than what it would have been if you didn't join the military, doesn't mean you have to have a leg blown off. Make sure you capitalize on that too. Yeah, I mean, what about, okay, let's go back a little bit. What else are you super passionate these days? You mentioned something LPD. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit? And then I would also, before we jump off, I do want to hear how you're managing these units in Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I've grown more and more passionate about recently and like carving out time for and advocating for from command, because I'm, in O3, I'm a captain in the Army. So like I'm not a company commander, but I work in a space where, you know, there's tons of opportunity and time because it's a structured operational environment for the clinic where we can carve out clinical time and say, hey, we're closed at certain times for training. And so I'm talking to the training team and saying, hey, we touch on LPDs, meaning leader professional developments, all the time on Army things. We talk about Army regulations and Army programs and how to, the relationship between an NCO and an officer, or the SHARP program, which are all extremely important things for a soldier to know. But like, how often are our
Sure.
soldiers who are either in their first year or are even E5, E6, E7 sometimes on their second, third, or fourth duty station, how often are they sat down and talked to about just like real adult crap that they have to deal with? Like,
Yeah.
like their credit score or how to buy a home or actually like using this TSP that someone told them about one time when they enlisted and never really heard about again after that. Besides the fact that like, hey, make sure you're at least matching 5%. Like they catch these little glimpses of it, like, oh, I've got to do this tax return. Let me go hire H&R Block to do this return for me when they have a single W-2 to submit, right? So like there's just some basic adult things that I don't think gets talked about often enough. And money in general is such a taboo topic in the world, but especially even in the military, where, like you said, we kind of have this pay chart to look at and we know what we're making now and what we can make in the future. But any conversations outside of that don't often happen unless there's someone really carving out extra time for it or is having sidebars or staying after work to like talk to someone who's interested about it. And so anyway, I go back to probably one of the most fulfilling days of my career so far was April 9th of 2025, just over a month ago, when I did an LPD and I sat down with a paper and pen beforehand and thought, okay, what would be the four most game-changing things for any service member to have at least a operating understanding of?
Ooh, dropping some bombs. I'm like getting
And
prepped for these four things right now.
and this is just out of Landon's brain. This was not a,
No, no, but this
I
is
used
great.
ChatGPT, but I just thought, man, if I was a private or if I was the brand new second lieutenant who hadn't already been exposed to some of this, what would be the biggest game changers for me? First of all, is making sure your TSP is at least in something other than the G fund, because if you never log into tsp.gov and if you never make any changes yourself, you are contributing to
You are
something that is going
screwed.
to be 2.5%. You're going to leave. And I saw a horror story on the Facebook group, dude, of these people that say, we just found out after 10, 15 years that we were in the G Fund the whole time. And I cannot imagine getting to that point and realizing there is hundreds of thousands of earnings that were left on the table simply because some leader somewhere along the line never took the time to tell that soldier, hey, by the way, you have to log into this thing,
Straight up
and
failed.
actually straight up failed. Like there was
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
stewardship there. So anyway, number one is TSP, just getting access to it at all and changing from the G Fund to anything else. Number two was high yield savings accounts. Super basic. Just and sometimes mind blowing for people to realize that there are saving accounts out there that are, FDIC insured that are earning so much more than their USAA savings accounts. I don't want to dig on
Yeah,
USAA. I love the
like a
company I use,
hundred. Oh,
but
yeah, like 100 times
0.01%.
more. It's not like a Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it's
Whereas
thousands
like
percent more.
3, 4, 5% is way. Yeah, it's like way better.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So to go from 0.01% earnings on your enlistment bonus has been sitting in a savings account for the last few years to suddenly 3.5% or 4% in a high yield savings account that isn't even an investment because it's insured by the federal government. Anyway, HYSAs, that's not even really investing, but it kind of is. And it's like intro to making your money work for you at a really basic level. So I was like, hey,
You
let's
got
talk
to keep
about
the
that.
velocity everywhere. Everywhere. Your
Yeah,
savings account should be making some kind of money. Your TSP should be in the right place making some kind of money. You should have money generating more money, money working for you. I agree. I agree.
that's it. Um, and then even though this kind of started getting maybe a little, if someone hasn't even logged into the TSP for the first time and they don't even know what an index fund or like, the C fund is, I was thinking, okay, maybe I shouldn't talk about real estate investing. That's kind of like advanced level stuff. But I did talk about number three was their VA loan and just ask ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, what are the advantages of the VA loan that pertain specifically to wealth generation over time and real estate investing specifically? And it gave me this epic 8 point like bullet point list of, you can use it multiple times, you have up to this entitlement limit. Obviously the like sometimes mind blowing for a lot of people is that you can get up to 4 units with your VA loan, right? Things we talk about probably every other episode on this podcast. And so I gave them this printout of, how to access your TSP, how to, and just what a HYSA is, and maybe some resources to find one. The 8 best things about the VA loan, and I don't have them memorized now or in front of me, but anyway, you could ask ChatGPT yourself. Hey, what is,
Yeah. What?
not you, but anyway, the listener that hasn't maybe thought
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
before. And then the last one was just the 4 pillars of real estate investing that you guys teach in ADPI that I caught in that boot camp when I first went through it, when I was going through ADPI campus. It was just this like no brainer moment for me to realize like, man, there are these 4 pillars to real estate investing that make it heads and tails above any other investing strategy out there for me. And I know you're a real estate maximalist, but those 4 pillars, yeah, let's touch on them,
Hey, that's
is
catching on.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's hit them. So number one, right, and correct me if I miss one, would be cash flow. I think cash flow is king. We want to make sure cash flow is happening. If you're cash flowing, you can stay alive even if the market drops, whatever. My personal favorite when I went through the boot camp was debt pay down. I think there's the concept that like there is leverage happening somewhere where you have a loan out in your name, for me in this case a fourplex in Alaska that's worth $700,000 that I no longer live in, but there are 4 tenants there that are paying that mortgage down every month, and my net worth every single month goes up incrementally as that principal's paid down. I think that's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
Um,
You handed the responsibility to somebody else to pay off a loan for you.
like what? Yeah, exactly. How is
Yeah,
that
I
not the
know, right?
coolest thing ever? That one, and that's the thing too. Like that one fourplex is going to be worth $1 million someday if I hold on to it long enough, and
Easy.
easy, right? And so a millionaire someday simply because I let other people live in it for 25 years. All right. Third would be the tax benefits depreciation. We could go all into that, but so many tax advantages of real estate, 1031 exchanges, etc. And then lastly, of course, the kind of cream on top, the, as Brandon Turner likes to call it, the lottery ticket that you shouldn't really like count on, but if it happens, it's awesome, would be appreciation and just, out of nowhere, you look back one day and your property that you bought for 500 is suddenly worth 750 and you're sitting on a nest egg. So I talked about all that with my service members. There was 30 of them in the room. Most of them were junior enlisted, quite a few NCOs as well. And I loved seeing those light bulbs. There's
Dude,
people
it's the
like raising
best.
their eyebrows when you say something like that. I walked away from work that day like floating out of the clinic. I just was so excited.
I
So
know. Dude, I just, you're telling me this, and I'm remembering I did this twice too, but I did it just to my shop. So, my communication strategy and operations, my public affairs shop in New Orleans. I think it was like one of the, yeah, yes. Who was it? It was probably our master guns. He was like, hey, you should teach these youngins the stuff you do. And I was like, okay. And they were just like notepad scribbling, like just soaking it in. They were like, and then then the funniest thing was our staff sergeant came up. Like, this was like hours later. He's like, man, they're downstairs talking about how they're gonna be millionaires now. Like, they can't even focus.
productivity ruined.
Yeah, I know. God, it felt so good to just be able to. One of them was like, I'm going all in. I want to get this. I want to get that. Like, somebody like there. I remember there's a. She was this tiny. I don't think she was 5 foot tall. Tiny little 19-year-old, Lance Corporal. So excited, full book of notes, just coming up to me, be like, "What can I do tomorrow?" And I was like, like you said, I just floated out of the room. I was so happy to be able to. It was kind of funny though. I was like, I felt like the old guy for a second, which I don't think of myself that way, but I was like, oh, let me teach you some wisdom. But hey, just because I know we're like significantly over an hour now, I want to make sure I understand what I think is going to be very valuable to everybody. Thanks for sharing everything you've shared so far. But what I really want to just touch on before we say goodbye is how you are managing overseas, because I think that's one of the biggest fears, at least when I started ADPI, was everybody's like, wait, we're in the military, we're too busy. What if I'm on deployment? What if I'm overseas? Blah, 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 blah. How is this even possible? And, part of me is just curious, do you use Turbo Tenant by chance?
I do, yeah. Yep, use the
Okay.
ADPI
So
affiliate link, all of it. Yep, we are using that
awesome,
on our
awesome.
property in Missouri. Yeah.
And so is that like, so yeah, talk me through, like, is it just because of modern technology now that it's like, it's A, more doable, and B, like, it's just not as scary since you kind of like did it one property at a time? Because are you fully self-managing?
I am not. So my fourplex in Alaska, three of the four units are managed by a property manager. Um, the fourth
Okay.
unit in that is the corporate rental one, and it's the one that
Okay.
pays the most. And so I didn't really want to be paying a percentage on that to someone that I could manage
Sure.
it pretty easily myself. So I thought, all right, I'll keep that one unit to myself. I have the other three that are just normal family long-term rentals that have turned over multiple times since then that I haven't even heard a word about, right? That's when I love property managers doing the work for you.
Right.
It's awesome. So there's a hybrid going on where three of my units in Alaska are managed. The fourth one I kind of handle myself. The single family home is rented to a corporate housing company. And the coolest thing about that is my tenant is the property manager that I'm not paying, they're paying me. So, right, like she's the steward of the home. She's placing the people in there to live. She's letting me know when there's maintenance that needs to get done and is like, hey, do you want me to take care of this? And she's my tenant, but she's paying me rent. So in that sense, like I'm managing the home and making sure that things are going. So I'm self-managing that unit, but technically the corporate rental company is kind
Yeah.
of also the property manager in that sense and making sure there's a tenant
Yeah.
in place. And then lastly, yep, this fourplex in the Midwest is one that my partner and I have decided to self-manage. And I say that with a little bit of a grain of salt because on June 1st, we're actually transitioning to a professional property manager as well on that one that's local to the town. And the decision point for that one came down to simply what is my time worth and what do I want to be spending
Right.
the most amount of my time on? And it just came down for both my partner and I that are not really doing this for the cash flow and we don't really need to do this. We're in it for the long haul. My time is best spent focusing on not the day-to-day management of a property, but more on, the next steps and the vision and the growth. And so we just recently made that decision to transition, but we did 5 months of self-management, including buying the property with 2 units becoming vacant and filling those vacancies completely remotely ourselves. And the biggest key thing is just having at least one solid boots on the ground person. Obviously, you need someone to physically be able to go and change a lock and do something for you. And that just comes down to networking. That just comes down to asking people that are in the market, you're the agents, the mentors, whoever it is, hey, who do you know that, is whether it's a handyman or whatever, and just calling a bunch of people up, seeing if they're open to those type of things and paying them for their time. Even if it's a phone call, their time is still worth something to you. So offer to pay, hey, let's jump on the phone and talk about this, but I'm going to pay you for your time no matter what you're doing. And we were able to manage on our own, including 3 new tenant placements in 5 months. It was a whirlwind. Tenant or turbo tenant knocked it out of the park. It posts all over the place. You get all the leads coming back with pre-screeners and
Wow. Yeah.
applications. So it's doable for sure. We just are deciding, again, pivot points, right? To
Yeah.
identity shift a little bit out of, I don't want to be caught up in the day-to-day of property management and I'm ready to focus elsewhere. But
Yeah, absolutely. I know that everybody's kind of like, well, again, goals, but also skill sets, also time priorities are different. Like I know I've talked to, for example, you were talking about Lorna Neely, our COO, a while ago. Like she has such a system down, and it's also her and her husband. They manage their properties together. That she would never want to let go. Right, as far as at least that's. I mean, maybe that'll change for her, but she's got it. She's basically started her own in-house property management company, and that's why. And it's a well-oiled machine. But then, and she also, for example, uses Turbo Tenant, which is like, I can't remember who it was I talked to recently. Actually, Betty also, but like somebody was overseas, and they were like, I think they were in Japan. They're like, yep, had an applicant accepted, signed the lease, bada bing, bada boom, everything from your freaking phone. So let me just do a shameless plug for our amazing partner. If you guys go to activedutypassiveincome.com/turbo tenant, one word, we have a really awesome partnership with them where you get the free account with bonuses absolutely for free, and you get a massive discount on their premium version, which you honestly don't need, but is even better. And you can fully manage all of your stuff remotely. Even, I just found this out yesterday, Landon, even multifamily up to 200 units. And it does all of the accounts receivable reports. It does the delinquency reports. I didn't know this. I was like, and they now have a cool partnership with Thumbtack. Was it Thumbtack, right? Where like they'll find contractors for you for any type of situation to go report, do the pictures, and even AI that'll help you suggest what maintenance you need on whatever the issues are. Just is wild. Really, really cool piece of software. But to your point, I actually talked to my some of my team members about this yesterday. It's like what helps me think through my decisions is I imagine what is my hour worth, right? So if you think of your hour, and you always have to set the bar for your hour to be worth more than it is right now. So let's say your hour right now at your current job plus entrepreneurial ventures is worth $50 an hour. Well, you set it at $100 an hour and start making decisions that way. Like I've set my hour now to be worth $1,000 because I want to fill the gap and get to that as fast as possible. And I think it's just a matter of how you think. Like I soon I'll probably set it up to $10,000 just because I want to force my decision making and team building to be thinking that way. And I think what you're saying is that you're valuing your hour at a certain amount, and there's certain hours, and maybe it's not even like it's just the follow-on effect of having to do maybe management stuff that you're like, you know what, I can do this. Obviously, very capable, but if I want to get more return on my hours, so my hours are worth more, that's you can sacrifice that one profit center, right, which is cash flow, or a little bit of it, for just acquiring more, having more headspace to, hey, you have an hour of time, instead of maybe once a month it's property management stuff, you spend finding the next deal. You see that as a building block to grow your hours value faster. It's something that you probably identified will compound faster, right? And grow that hourly value, or value of your hour, if you will. Am I thinking about that right?
Yep, 100%. I think that's a really great way to look at it. And thinking of a compounding interest, but instead of it on money, thinking of it on your time, that's an awesome way. I've never thought of it that way, but I like that a lot. Of, If we're continually putting our time into the things that are worth the most and are going to result over time, those things compounding on itself and resulting in whether your net worth is your metric or just happiness in life too. Like, let's not forget just like the importance of doing things that just simply make you happy, even if it costs money or doesn't make you money. Just going on my bike ride during lunch today with a coworker and getting up and into the hills of Italy, like that was an hour and a half of my time that I probably could have spent digging into some more real estate and making some phone calls, but like I came back to
No,
work just
yeah.
feeling energized by these this bike ride that I got to have with a friend, so that time and the interest that's going to accrue on your spending your time in the place that is the most impactful and meaningful and fulfilling for you. I think that's where you really get to that your potential and feeling like you're living in that space where
Yeah.
like, man, I really got to my potential.
I love the bike riding thing because to me it's like it's like time off, family, work is kind of like my triangle, but like they all need to feed each other. My time off, sleeping, or my time being with my family should energize how effective I am at working. And then my work should enhance my ability. Like if you're really tired after, going to the gym, working all day, you should get better sleep. If you work more, if you work harder, right? You really just immerse yourself and you get good sleep, you should be in a better mood and more energized to spend quality time with your family. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline to really, but it's like a cycle, right? Like if you think of them as helping each other instead of like, I heard somebody say once, like, that they don't like the word like work-life balance. It's like work-life integration. Or if you think of it as like this cycle, like it should help each other, right? It shouldn't be at odds with each other to where you're like, oh, well, I need to put this in this basket and this in this basket. They're all feeding each other. So, gosh, Landon, I can't thank you enough. I think we've had some great conversations. I think everybody listening is going to just get so much value from hearing your story. What is we're going to put all your contact information in our show notes, but what is the easiest way for somebody to get a hold of you if they want to pick your brain, if you will? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say Instagram's kind of the go-to for most people. So you can find me at Landon J Fillmore, and that's probably the go-to. And then LinkedIn as well. You can search Landon Fillmore. There's not very many of us in the world, so it probably wouldn't be too hard to find me. And you'll see on there, medical service corps officer and real estate investor on LinkedIn, and you can hit me up there. And then thirdly, I think would be within ADPI campus. So shameless plug there as well if you're in that community. I think I've connected with so many people in the ADPI community, and so if you want to hit me up there as well, you can. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, awesome, Landon. And as I always say, guys, please like, share, subscribe, because that's a part of our mission. We're impacting 3 million military families. Having you join that mission, having you spread what we do and share Landon's story with everybody to hear. Everybody, I truly believe that everybody in the military would benefit from stories like this. So thank you, Landon, for sharing that. Thank you, everybody who's listening, who gives us your vote of confidence and shares this story for others to hear on social media and wherever you spend time. Thank you again for coming on, Landon. And yeah, I can't wait for this to air and hear the response.
Yeah, me too. It'll be awesome. Yep, I love sharing it, and it's a fun moment to share that and say, hey, here's an episode to go and listen to, and to hear that feedback is always confidence building as well. To think, man, I got on and talked for an hour and a half with Mark on Seach about real estate. Like, that's pretty cool. So
Oh, no, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for the kind words, Landon. And yeah, take care, brother.
hey, you as
Bye.
well. Bye.